Julie
Okay.
knows me well.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So what this is week 1 of our advanced continuing ed. So this is very different than before. The other ones were addressing 8 specific subjects. This series is designed to teach you the real inside track on essential oils. You know, what they are, where they come from, the science behind them. We'll be analyzing all the scientific parts like we did in the essential oil course that doTERRA offered. That is where this comes from. And this is kind of a more of a reiteration. And for those of you who couldn't get that course or don't want to spend $97 to get it, and certainly a lot of your prospects don't want to spend that kind of money, you are welcome to share this with them so that they can learn the same things we learned. We learned how companies cut corners, right? We learned how to present these to customers. We learned about various oils and about their chemical compounds. So that is what this course is for. And I'm going to do this. I don't know how many parts it's going to take because I don't want any of them to go very long. So I've broken it up into sections, and I'll just take it, you know, I want to talk for about a half an hour or so, and then we're going to have a group discussion for another like 10, 15 minutes so that we can really solidify this in our heads, right? Okay, so let me go ahead and get started. So what are essential oils? We know, right? We know that they're everywhere around us. They're in so many products that we're using every day, like, or there are perfumes, they're in cleaning products, in bath products. In fact, if you've been watching the news or anything or commercials lately, you've seen there are a whole bunch of weird things that have essential oils in it. Raid now has Raid with essential oils. They've got Gain detergent with essential oils. That doesn't mean that product is pure or natural in any way, shape, or form, because if you look at the other ingredients, they're still there. But they've added some essential oils. Is that good? I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's a marketing gimmick, but they're there, right? And so we're seeing them all over. They're really getting a lot of exposure lately. They flavor our candy, our soda, toothpaste. Sometimes they're natural, sometimes they're synthetic. We know that, right? And they're hidden in the zest of lemons. There's our natural oils, right? The needles of our pine trees, the petals of roses. And so essential oils are the essence of a plant, which is distilled into a usable oil in these wonderful little bottles that we have them in, right? That makes it easier for us to use so that we don't have to go pick 100 rose petals and rub them all over our bodies, because that would be really hard. Okay, so to move on, they are made up of all these volatile organic compounds. So these are what you commonly refer to as VOCs, right? And VOCs are in a lot of products. They're in a lot of synthetic products, and VOCs can be bad in synthetic products because they're volatile. They're getting in our air. They're making us ill. But if they're created by nature, they are doing quite the opposite. Like if you walk through a forest, you're going to be exposed to a lot of VOCs coming off of the plants and the trees as you're walking through there. And most of those are going to be really uplifting and healthy for you. So that's why we feel good when we take a long walk and we can enjoy nature. And how many of you, when you pass by a flower, how many of you guys reach over and sniff the flower or rub the leaves so you can get the scent of the plant? Or figure out what it is, right? What is this plant? I don't know. Here, rub the leaves. Oh, that smells like rosemary, right? It's simple. So scientifically, these essential oils are a really big mixture of these completely natural chemicals that give plants those smells. And those natural chemical molecules are the VOCs we've been talking about. So obviously, there's a lot of chemicals in everything. So what makes these VOCs different than VOCs from anything else? So the volatile organic compounds are these small organic molecules with very distinct smells that easily change from a solid or liquid state to a gas at room temperature. So this ability to quickly change to a gas gives an essential oil its powerful scent. And when a bottle's open, you can smell it almost immediately thanks to those fast-moving molecules reaching your nose, right? So when you open a bottle, I mean, how many of you can tell when somebody else opens a bottle of oil? You're like, okay, somebody yeah, you know it, right? It just gets out there so fast. And you know somebody's opened it, and then you're like, okay, what was that? What did they open, right? And essential oils are lipid soluble. So we've talked about this in our intro to oils class, right? This is some of the very basics. They are lipid soluble, which means they can penetrate the cell wall and get to the viruses inside and make changes at the viral level, which means they can work really well on viruses because they are entering the cell and they can actually have an impact on viruses, whereas a lot of medication from our doctors can't. So that helps when we can work at a cellular level, because that's where the basis of all life is, right? In the cells. If we want to live longer, if we want to live healthier, we want to have really great functioning cells. We talked about this in our intro to oils class, of course. So they dissolve in fats as opposed to water. right? Because oil is a lipid, for example, and you know oil and water don't mix. No matter how hard you try, we shake it and still see those little oil molecules in there, right? But oil will easily dissolve in other oils. So we look at the chemical constituents in various things. So the chemical constituents are what give an oil its benefits. So each essential oil is made up of various natural chemical constituents that give it that unique aroma and lots of beneficial properties. And so there's a lot of different chemicals, and you know, we're already familiar with some of them, like the alcohols, the esters, and the chemical makeup of the essential oil is what gives the oil those benefits. For example, if it's soothing and rejuvenating the skin or providing feelings of clean airways, the chemical makeup of that essential oil is why it can affect your body so powerfully. So if we look at these, we can see some of the chemical compounds in these common flowers. I don't know if you can see, I can't see the screen very well because I can't see very well, but you see like this one has rose oxide, it's got damascenone, and I can't read ionone, I think the ionone in it. So each different flower will have different natural chemicals in it, and each of those chemicals does a very specific thing in the human body, which is what we're always researching, right? That's what we're studying all the time to find out what does it do, so what can it do for us, and where do they come from? So essential oils, we know they're extracted from various plants, but not every plant actually produces an essential oil. And in fact, out of the enormous number of plant species on Earth, fewer than 5% are known to produce an essential oil. So far we have over 17,000 aromatic plants that we've been investigating, right? To see whether they can produce essential oils. And of those plants, 2,000 plants are used to produce about 3,000 different oils. What? Well, that difference means some plants are used to create multiple oils. For instance, coriander and cilantro, two favorite kitchen herbs and oils, come from the same plant. They're two completely different essential oils from their smell to their chemical makeup. And the difference is that coriander comes from the seed and cilantro from the leaf. And of these 3,000 essential oils, only about 300 are commonly produced. And essential oils are quickly growing in popularity, so maybe we'll see more oils in the future. We always see them, right? Every year we're seeing more and more oils coming out there. So this map, I really like this, and if I'll post this video so you can never look, but it's nice to see a visual map where you can kind of visualize where each of these oils, that this is doTERRA's map of where they source each of these different oils. You can see they've gone all over the world, haven't they? They have traveled far and wide to make sure that we're getting the oils that are grown in the best environment possible, so that we're getting the best benefits of those oils. Because not every chemical has a great benefit. Some natural chemicals in these oils have, as far as we can tell, no particular benefit to us at all. They might have a benefit to the plant and maybe something that hasn't been researched, but maybe not necessarily for us. So why don't all plants produce an essential oil? Really good question, right? Why not? Can't they squeeze something and get oil out of it no matter what it is? It's a plant, right? I should be able to squeeze it and get oil. But that's a really good question. It takes a lot of energy for a plant to produce these essential oils. So you imagine if you had to run everywhere you go. And so they only produce essential oils sparingly when they need to. So plants reserve production of essential oils for times when they're most needed. So for defense, for healing, for growth. And essential oils can be a great defense mechanism against infections and predators like insects and animals. And that's why so many are great for pest control. So when their leaves or stems are damaged, they produce essential oils. And they do this to deter those threats and prevent further damage, allowing that plant to heal. The plant also uses the essential oils to communicate with other plants. So it's smell phone, not cell phone, slowing the growth of competing nearby species. And this little trick is called allelopathy. Another great way essential oils help plants is by attracting pollinators like the bees, butterflies, hummingbirds. How many of you guys have seen those all summer long? I see all these. We've got bees everywhere. And butterflies. Oh my gosh, I've seen the most beautiful butterflies this summer, as I've been outside looking around. And of course, the hummingbirds are out. We've got our hummingbird feeder out to make sure that they're happy. And other animals are also drawn to the plant and help disperse the seeds, including us, right? So we inadvertently contribute to this whenever we carry burrs, twigs, whatever, home on our socks, shoes, clothes after a hike, right? So we are out there pollinating things because we're carrying these things on our bodies. And how much essential oil does a plant contain? So not all plants will produce the same amount of essential oil. And that's, one of the reasons they vary so differently in the prices that they are, right? And you can experience this for yourself. When you say squeeze like an orange peel, enough oil is released to coat your hand, but crushing a peppermint leaf only has a tiny amount in it. This is called its yield. And you can calculate yield by looking at the amount of oil produced compared to the amount of the original plant material. So we take an extreme, like rose, for example, is considered a low yield essential oil. It can take around 10,000 blossoms to produce that little 5 milliliter bottle of rose oil. On the other hand, sandalwood is a high yield oil. It only takes about a quarter pound of sandalwood to make a 5 milliliter bottle. And yield can vary even within the same species. So rosebush in one environment will produce more oil than another, depending on things like climate, predators, and pollination. And when you think about that, and this is something we'll discuss because I think this is very important, recognizing that if it's in a different environment, so if it's in a less than perfect environment, it may produce more oil, but it might not be the oil we want, right? Not the strength we want or the types of constituent chemicals that we're looking for in that oil, but it might produce a bunch of it. So you could go somewhere and get a really cheap rose oil, right? Just like probably in California, you can get a ton of really cheap lavender oil because our lavender plants produce a lot of oil and they're pretty crummy, actually. I mean, as far as the oil that it produces, but it can produce a lot. So if you're just looking for quantity and you want to just sell that quantity to somebody, you can do that. It's not something doTERRA will do, but you could definitely do that. So now I want to talk a little bit briefly about the history of the essential oils. So we know that crude forms of essential oils have been used for thousands of years. So archaeologists have found evidence of the use of these essential oil forerunners in many ancient societies. And we don't exactly know which culture was the first to use them, but records really indicate it could have been like the Egyptians, the Chinese, or Indus civilizations. And throughout history, people all over the world have used the power of plant extracts for things like health practices, religious ceremonies, cultural rituals, and food. An essential oil plant material like frankincense resin was even used as a form of currency at certain times. And one of the most famous uses was as a perfume. So if you ever want to smell like Cleopatra, a safe bet would be rose, myrrh, cardamom, or cinnamon, as these scents were popular in ancient Egypt. Egyptian, Indus, Chinese, and Greek civilizations all contributed to what we now know about the powerful uses of essential oils. So let's talk about a little bit about Egypt. Essential oils in ancient history in Egypt. When you think of Egypt, tombs and mummies tend to be some of the first things that come to mind, right? Now, burial traditions in Egyptian culture were of the utmost importance. The Egyptians observed specific rituals and sought to give as many luxuries to the deceased as they could afford. And researchers have found that one such luxury was those precious plant extracts. I mean, how many of you guys are thinking, maybe I should be buried with my plant extracts too? Kind of cool, huh? And aromatic residues have been found in unearthed jars in these Egyptian tombs, as well as on actual mummies. So the walls of Egyptian temples are decorated with images depicting the use of potent plant extracts. And historical records suggest that Egyptian healers also recommended them for health purposes. Now, the first use of aromatics likely occurred in ancient Egypt, China, or Indus. So let's talk about the Indus civilizations. So in the area where India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan are today, left behind clues of plant use. And the people of this era were some of the first to attempt their own method of extracting essential oils from plants. I love this picture. I mean, does that look really primitive or what? This is a really cool picture. And archaeologists have found a rudimentary invention made of terracotta pottery that they believe was used to create those early plant extracts somewhere around 3000 BC. And that's like 5,000 years ago, right? Keep in mind that this would have been roughly the time when humans first developed writing, before the old kingdom of Egypt was founded, and around when Stonehenge was being built. So more than 1,000 years later, Indus civilizations still used plant extracts for various purposes. So now we're talking about, 2000 BC, right? Cinnamon, ginger, myrrh, sandalwood, and coriander extracts are listed in an ancient Indian book of plant uses called the Vedas. From the Vedas, the ancient tradition of Ayurvedic medicine was born, and this practice actually continues to today. We've all heard about it, right? Everybody's heard of Ayurvedic medicine, I'm sure. Do I need to answer a question? Do we have, I saw somebody chat in. Or comment. Okay, comments, yeah. Oh, which one? What area is the Garden of Eden, Faith?
So you're talking about the countries that are on this screen right now. Which three did you mention?
It was India, Pakistan, where was it? And Afghanistan.
Okay, so Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, that whole area is where the Garden of Eden is. Isn't
And that
that?
makes sense that that would be developed there first,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It completely makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then in China, so we all hear about medicine in China. They've always been kind of, we always consider them kind of on the cutting edge of natural medicine, right? And between 500 and 1300 AD, so this is a lot later, right? China was a leading world power with advances in sciences and technology far ahead of any other civilization of the time. So they conducted extensive research, leading to many advances in the usage of plants. For example, references to aromatic plants are in the widely read and highly influential book, Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine. Anybody read that, by the way? No?
I haven't.
I don't even know if it's in English. I assume it is also reprinted in English. Now, some believe that this guide was actually written about 2600 BC. Protocols based on experiences and research done in ancient China have been passed down through many generations and still actually influence our modern healthcare to this day. We see that all the time. We always hear about Chinese medicine, right? We hear about Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine. We hear the words homeopathic, holistic. You know, these are different types of medicine and the names that we've been giving them over, over the many years as these things are being developed. So I want to finish up with Greece. So in Greece, historical accounts suggest ancient Greek physicians Hippocrates, the Ophrystus, and excuse me if I'm pronouncing these wrong, Dioscorides and Galen each used the aromatic power of plants for health solutions. And the Romans famously employed Greek physicians at the Colosseum. We've heard of that, right? Where they used plant extracts when they were performing surgeries on injured gladiators. And the research of these physicians influenced many health practices throughout Greek culture. Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine, Hippocrates wrote, healing begins with an aromatic bath and daily massage. Does that sound nice? And we all know this quote, right? From Hippocrates again, our food should be our medicine and our medicine should be our food. So this is where I want to kind of finish today. And now I want to kind of discuss what we have learned and answer any questions about this and take your comments too. Anybody? No? I thought this one would take longer than that. Interesting. Okay, so, recognizing the history of essential oils tells us a lot because we are advancing as a nation, right? Whether you live in US, Canada, some of the other countries, we're all in developed countries, right? We call these developed countries. And developed, a lot of times, it is confusing because it's like we're developed countries, but we're so backwards when it comes to some of these basic forms of medicine, the actual roots of medicine and ways to heal ourselves. And we need to be more responsible for how we can take care of our bodies and do the best we can do with what we're given. Because a lot of things we're finding can be fixed by simply maybe changing your diet, changing activity, which again, helps our systems, our digestive systems. We know is helping with exercise. If we can't do that, we can look at what we eat. And we can add essential oils and some of the supplements that doTERRA has, which is incorporated essential oils and herbs in them, because those are, again, things that really help the human body. So when we're talking about these things, and we're talking about, so we'll go back to the very beginning. Do you guys understand what these VOCs are, these volatile organic compounds that are in these oils? So you understand, like if I pick up an oil, like this grapefruit oil, okay? So this seems pretty simple, right? It's grapefruit oil, right? What do we use it for? We may diffuse it a lot or smell it a lot because it helps with food cravings, right? We know it helps a lot with a lot of digestive things. A lot of people like to add grapefruit to those. It's in our Slim and Sassy blend, right? And what we have to recognize is if you were to look up the mass spec of this oil, you're gonna find like 30 or 40 different natural chemicals that are part of grapefruit, right? So one of the ones that come to mind. So what is the one that comes to mind when I pick up a fruit oil? What chemical compound do you guys all think of?
Here.
Come on, you guys.
Liminal.
Yeah, I know. It starts with an L.
Liminal something.
The limonene.
Limonene.
Limonene is what you're thinking of, yes. Yeah, so we know that in the fruit oils that they are high in limonene, generally speaking, right? And that is one of those chemical compounds. So let's kind of go through some of them since we have a little bit of time. And the whole reason I'm doing this is because I want you to remember what I just taught you in this class. I'm trying to make these kind of short because I want you to take away and remember everything that was discussed, because people do ask. People will ask like, oh, what were some of the oils used in biblical times? Do you guys know that actually? Here, let's discuss that. How many of you have heard names of essential oils in the Bible or something, or any other, religious book, and that was written many, many eons ago? And what are those? What oils are those?
Well, I can think of two. Frankincense and myrrh, they were two that were given to the Christ child when he was born by the wise men.
Okay, any other ones that you can think of that were mentioned?
Yeah, the priests in Israel were anointed with a lot of different oils, and pomegranate, I think, was one of the base oils for it, but also like cassia. I can't think of some of the other ones. Like, I wasn't prepared to like answer this question, but I know there's like 5 or 6 of them that I remember.
The only reason I'm asking questions like this, guys, is because I want us to be able to think. Because if you just listen to me talk, you're not going to remember a lot. And I want you guys to do some thinking. So, when we think back to that, you're right. It was
spikenard. That was another one.
Yes, another one. Very common.
Another one.
Very similar to lavender, right?
Yeah.
So these were used way back when in biblical times, and obviously even before, based on when they came out, right? I mean, we can't go back 5,000 years, but I'd be very curious what they used them for 5,000 years ago. So think really hard. You're in a really old civilization, very, nothing modern. There's no technology. It's 5,000 years ago. What do you think they used oils for?
I'm sure for healing wounds, because, what do they use for first aid? They don't have like Neosporin around the corner, Like we have Correct X now, but
Yep. So some of them for healing. What else do you think they use them for?
Maybe flavoring food.
That would make sense. Yep. Now, what about preserving food? That they had to preserve food? Think about it. You go out, you kill a deer. You have to feed your family for the next few weeks on that deer, probably, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't know when the next one's going to come along, and maybe it's coming up winter and you're not going to be growing a lot of vegetables or something. I mean, depending where you live, I always wonder, how did they survive as we trek into some of these colder climates with these long winters? Because not everything grows then. It must have been really hard. And so how did they preserve their food? Obviously, if it's cold enough, if you're way, way, way up north, I guess you can preserve it in the snow, right? That's one way to preserve food. But what do you think they did with the oils?
Well, maybe they rubbed them on the meat of the animal that they caught. I don't know.
That would be smart, right? And actually, they do that now. They're adding essential oils to feed that they give cows because they found it cuts down on mold. So that's something they're doing because it's saving them money, and they were having, a lot of problems. So, throughout old civilizations, they would have had to find ways to solve some problems, right? And people, if they're sick, what are they going to do? Well, it's always, and this is what I don't get nowadays, it's always better to try something than do nothing, right? If I'm sick and I've got my oils and there's nothing else, and the doctor's telling me, well, we don't know what you have and we don't really know what to do for you, then why wouldn't I just try some oils? And that's what they did back then. I'm sure it was a lot of trial and error. And, I didn't want to be the first one to reach for the berry and try it, because some of those people died, right? You don't want to be the volunteer for that. But somebody had to, right? We had to find out what foods we could eat, and we may not have known. So the same thing with the oils. That's what they used, the oils. They probably tried things, and they said, okay, well, that's not really good for that, or that, hey, that worked really well, and I put this oil on this, and this was my response, right? And then they would keep records of that, because they did keep records. They, like the early forms of writing and stuff, they did keep records back then. So it'd be really interesting to get a hold of these records and see what they did. So we know that oils and herbs have a lot of really great benefits for us historically, and it's because of all the different compounds. Now, if you take 2 oils, so let's say I take something like frankincense and Siberian fir. So I take these two oils, very different oils, right? Totally different. And if you look at the chemical makeup, you may see very, very little crossover with the chemical compounds because there are a lot of chemical compounds, guys. When you're talking about oils, there are so many different ones. There are overlaps, and that's why we have to be careful sometimes when we're using oils and not to use too much because, you know, like somebody, one of our girls mentioned, and she said she had a class and they passed around like 50 oils. Don't do that. That's way too many oils because you're going to get too much of certain things. Like if you pass around thyme, which is super high in thymol, and then you're also at the same time you're using another oil that also happens to be fairly high in thymol. Now you've been exposed to too much thymol, and it's going to throw your system out of whack, and that's not going to feel good. You know, because when our systems are out of whack, what's the response to a system that's out of whack? What are our basic responses?
The fight or
Upset
flight.
stomach.
Stomach, right?
The fight or flight.
Yeah, fight or flight. Your system gets what we call racy, right? Or really fatigued. So because all of these things, all these oils do have to detox still through the liver. I mean, everything has to detox in your body, including these. I mean, they have to be metabolized. So your food has to be metabolized. These oils have to be metabolized. But if you're taking a whole bunch of oils at once, that is too much work for your liver. Just like if you ate too much food at once, it's really too much for your liver. And we feel it when we do it, right? So I don't know how many people have ever done that. I mean, how many of you have had just a really fun day and you've like tasted or smelled a ton of oils? Anybody ever done that?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Nope.
So I haven't myself yet either, but I have talked to people who have, and they all say the same thing. They kind of felt weird the next day, maybe headache, sluggish, something like that. And that's because they really threw their systems out. You know, you throw your system out of whack, and we want to be careful that we're not doing that. So any other questions as I finish up kind of this block of the training on the advanced training?
Yeah, I think not necessarily today, but maybe if we could go over some of those things about overloading, because sometimes I forget that these oils have all these different chemical compounds, and I was like, oh, well, this is good for this and this is good for that, and I need that today. And then if I put them together, I'm like, oh no, what did I just do to myself? I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
So,
and that's why knowing the chemical compounds in your oils is important. And the best way to find out that easily is in the Modern Essentials book. They actually list the primary chemical constituents because it doesn't matter if it has like 0.01, you know, who cares, right? But some of these are like 20%, 40%, even 80% of a certain compound, and that's where you want to be careful with mixing it with another one that's also 80%. It would be like us taking, okay, we know we like to put lemon in our water to help us lose weight, right? So that'd be like me grabbing my lemon, putting it in my water, and then saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to also put my my grapefruit in there. I think I'll throw in some wild orange, and you know, you can see where that's going, right? That's just too much. Okay, you don't want to have all of that limonene in your system at once. So you want to be really careful when you're doing that. That's why we have to remember these essential oils, they're not toys, they're medicine. We have known all along that they're medicine. And so next week, what we're going to do is next week we go delving deep into the science. So it's going to be really kind of nerdy and stuff like that, right? And we're going to talk about, you know, the developments in essential oil science. We're going to talk about extracting the oils, you know, how we actually extract them from the plants, all the different methods we use, why we use those methods will be part of it. We'll talk about, you know, cold pressing versus the steam distillation that is commonly used on most of the oils, and the cold pressing that's commonly used on the fruit oils. Yet we'll talk about how they affect us, the different ways that they affect us as we use them. So we're going to go over that part next week. So this is kind of like, you know, this kind of fluff is kind of like setting the groundwork for everything. It's kind of basic. We know a lot of these things. We know that they're in a gazillion products. And when they're in products, typically, if you were to analyze, like I've done this. So I went when Gain did this commercial and they said, oh, Gain with essential oils. I said, oh, okay, so is that a natural product? So I went to the Gain website, got all the ingredients and everything like that. They still had artificial fragrance in it, still had a list of like 30 chemicals that I would never want to get near me in any way, shape, or form. Certainly don't want them on my clothes. So they still had all those other things. And so the amount of essential oil in those products is maybe a drop, but they're doing it for marketing purposes, because a drop of, you know, a combination of 10 oils, so it might be like a tenth of a drop of each oil, is not going to have a significant effect. And we don't want it to, because you can imagine, it's just like now, when you buy products at the store, a lot of them contain fragrance. Fragrance is typically a petroleum-based product. If you use one product probably not a big deal. Now you use another product, another product. So now you use about 20 products. They all contain a petroleum base. Now you've really messed up your body because you've really taken in too much of this petroleum that has to be detoxed from your body. And none of these things are ever tested together, right? So, you know, women especially, we're more at risk for a lot of these things because what do? We wake up, we do our hair, we use shampoo, conditioner, we use some face cream possibly, we put on our makeup, right? We might put on hand lotion, whatever. If you're using all those things and they're synthetic, that is a lot of synthetics in your body. And they all have the same exact base. So it'd be like using one essential oil for everything. Like if I took an essential oil and I put it all over my face and I put it in my hair and I put it on my body and then I consume some of it, that's probably going to be too much. If it was the exact same oil, right? That's not what we're supposed to do. We are using different oils for various purposes, not the same oil everywhere, because again, that would be too much. So remembering that when we're looking at oils and we're talking about oils and trying to discover how they work, why they work the way they do in our bodies, it's terribly important to realize that they are being used in products out there in very, very small amounts. So the difference is when we take them purposely out of these bottles and taking a drop or two at a time, right? We are getting a very, very large dose because that's how they work medicinally. If we just want to play with it and flavor something, we can use a very small amount. And that's why even one drop of lemon in an entire pitcher of lemonade will be a very distinctive difference in taste. It is that strong. So we use them medically, basically, right? Medicinally. And we're doing that on purpose. And it's in other products in very, very small amounts. So I don't want you to be afraid that it's all over and it's in, you know, in small amounts in these various products. But be careful when you buy something with essential oils because we don't know, is it a synthetic version of that essential oil? Is it a natural version of that essential oil? How much is actually there? Probably a very small amount, right? And so we will be, as we delve into this really deep, we're going to be talking more about the actual chemical constituents and what each chemical constituent does to the body, okay? So that kind of finishes up today. Any other questions before you go?
No, that was interesting.
Yeah, so, and you learned this before, you know, a lot of us took the
Yeah.
course and we learned some of this, and we're just kind of reiterating the history of it. So some of the key things we want to remember, because these are the things we might be asked by our customers or other people, you know, trying to learn about doTERRA, trying to learn how to solve problems in their health. We want to remember what they are. They are very, very strong medicinal products that are a pure natural chemical. So they work well with the body because they're natural instead of synthetics. That works well with us. They need to be treated like medicine because just like medicine, you can have problems if you overuse it. You can, you know, you don't take a whole bottle of lemon, let's say, and down it, right? We don't do that. That's bad. We don't do it. Okay, because these are super strong. And a lot of people, when they're first starting out, they need to start with just one drop. They start with one drop and they can work their way up from there if they do need more of that. And that's why we don't want people just playing with them. You can play with them aromatically. That's pretty safe to play with them aromatically. But when we're ingesting oils, we have to know what we're doing and we want to learn how to use them properly. And that's why doTERRA likes people to work with somebody, with mentors, right? That's why we have mentors. Because all of you guys, I see you guys all the time asking questions, right? And if you have a question about how to use a product, you're asking somebody, right? And somebody's answering you, oh yeah, I wouldn't take more than about 2 drops at a time. We're helping each other to use these products because we want to use them carefully, we want to use them properly. So we need to understand them better so that we can give good information to people who are trying to solve actual human problems. Okay, so we'll start up again next week. We'll have this. Tomorrow is my intro to oils. If anybody has anybody to invite, if you have friends who are still kind of new to oils and just are curious about them, invite them to that class tomorrow, same time as this one. And then there's another one. Thursday is continuing ed. That's week number 7 for those of you trying to get your certificate. That's week number 7. So 2 weeks left of that, and then you guys get your first certificate. This will be a different certificate. This class, when you finish this, you will be an advanced expert on essential oils. So this is a completely different certificate. We like having certificates because it helps people understand what we have learned, that we have, you know, gone out there, sought out extra training so that we could be more helpful. You know, that's what professionals need to do when we are professionals in the essential oil industry, and we need to be well informed. We have to stay informed, and we have to keep learning as they should in anybody, any field. I mean, you know, Barbara and Faith, you two are in the educational field, and I'm sure you know, I would hate it to think that, you know, 30 years ago, or 20 years ago when you started, you stopped learning. I would hope that you kept learning with the times, and as things changed, you kept learning, because that makes you a better teacher, a better person in your industry, right?
Exactly. Yep.
That's important. So whatever industry you're in, it's important that you keep up with current developments in your industry. And this one is rapidly changing because we're learning so much about essential oils, and so much of that information has been provided to us more recently. Okay, so hopefully I'll see you at one of the other events this week. Reach out to me. Brenda, it's good to see you. Reach out to me if you need any help at all, okay? I'll talk to you guys later.
Jenny. Have a good night. Bye.
Bye.